So, we're continuing in our webinar. You want to include, as I said previously, relevant issues to the age group. So, Bodart talks about that those issues might be drugs, sex, abuse, betrayal, bullies, prejudice, anger, and isolation. She says they're not easy topics to discuss, but teens are able to get the intellectual and emotional information they so badly need from these um, pieces of literature. So that's going to be something, depending on your school, depending on what's acceptable, something that you want to look at. Okay, so you want to look for titles with strong characters, an interesting plot, and a dynamic writing style. So those characters are going to be not just one sided, not just boring. We need characters to get involved with. Interesting plot. I've noticed with my students that they want things happening. Um, and so you might remember that. Especially another thing when you're choosing books to book talk, you want to avoid books you don't like. So that's, as I said previously, if you don't know the book or if you don't like the book, it's going to show through. Teens will pick up on it in a heartbeat. So, um, definitely, as I said, avoid books that you haven't read or that you don't like because it's going to show through. So, book talk responses. This is where I think I would get nervous. How are they going to respond to my book talk? So, Bodart says that responses can be across the board. Some kids can be super excited. Some students or kids might just, I don't know, seem like they don't care at all, and others might be like, oh, that was dumb, that was a waste of time. Don't get discouraged about that though. Often teens especially are too cool to show that they like reading or to show that they're interested in a book, so just give it some time. They might come up and browse the books and surprise you. Don't be discouraged. Know that what you're doing is going to engage students one way or another. So, to give you a sample book talk passage and choice, I went with The Maze Runner. My ninth grade students, I don't think I've ever heard one of them say that they did not like The Maze Runner. So, this is a good choice. It has a Lexile, I believe, of like 770. So, it's an accessible book that has lots of action. So this is a passage that you could pull from the Maze Runner. I chose actually the first couple of paragraphs. And so I would read it something like this. I would say, okay, I'm going to read you a passage from the Maze Runner. He began his new life standing up, surrounded by cold darkness and stale, dusty air. Metal ground against metal. A lurching shudder shook the floor beneath him. He fell down at the sudden movement and shuffled backward on his hands and feet, drops of sweat beating on his forehead despite the cool air. His back struck a hard metal wall. He slid along it until he hit the corner of the room. Sinking to the floor, he pulled his legs up tight against his body, hoping his eyes would soon adjust to the darkness. So I chose this because there's so much suspense. You have this idea of what's his new life? He's standing up. What's he doing somewhere where it sounds like metal grinds against metal? He's in complete darkness. What's going on here? So I think this would really engage students. Um, One of the last things I wanted to share with you all is the concept of book talk displays. So in the library, not just doing a book talk, but also leaving those books on display and creating ways for students to continue to interact with those variety of books once your book talk is over. So Joyce Sarix is the author of the Reader's Advisory Guide to Genre Fiction from ALA Editions, and she says that she thinks displays are the easiest and best marketing tool in libraries. She also says that as librarians, we can learn which topics interest our public and use that information to make decisions about collection development and build our circulation. So her rules for displays were: don't select titles from new books. Those books are already on display, they're already pulled out and separate. So don't choose ones that are new because those are already having attention brought to them. Books must have jackets, she says. Covers sell books when it comes to teens. The older titles that don't have jackets, there's nothing enticing about those. So you want to choose ones that have jackets that can be enticing. And then the books have to be good. They have to be ones that you love, your students love. They have to already have met the gold standard for being good and interesting. And so here are some examples that I thought were pretty neat creative displays. I would also have more added to these, but I thought they were neat. So on the visual left, we have an example talking about dystopian literature that includes The Maze Runner, which I gave you example of a few slides ago. So it says, you think you have it bad, because teens love to complain. And then the definition of dystopia. So you would have already done a book talk over these, maybe obviously dystopian literature, and then you would have these displayed and maybe add more to this. And then on the visual right, we have banned books. My favorite part is where it says, you can't read that. So the caution tape is going to get their attention, but then you can't read that. Tell a teenager they can't do something, and they're probably going to be like, hey, actually, I'm going to do that because you told me not to. So I also feel like there are tags on the books that give them maybe why they were banned, and so that's going to entice them as well. So that was my webinar. Here are my references. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to learn a lot, and hopefully you can leave me some great feedback.